CTE Culinary ServSafe Chapter for the Safe Food Hand. Is it acceptable for a server to eat a bowl of soup in the server station? No, never when serving food. After handling dirty dishes, a server washes their hands in the 3-compartment sink. Is this acceptable? No, hands should only be washed in a designated hand-washing sink. What must food handlers do after touching their body or clothing? Wash their hands. What should a manager do with a food handler who has been vomiting? Exclude them from the operation. What is jaundice? Yellowing of the skin. What action should a manager take when a food handler reports having diarrhea and being diagnosed with a foodborne illness caused by Shigella spp? Exclude the food handler from the operation. What must always be worn when in a food prep area? Hair restraint. Where should personal items, like a coat, be stored in the operation? Away from food. If a food handler has a wound on their arm, they cannot prepare food until they cover the wound with an impermeable cover. Why should food handlers not wear false fingernails? They are hard to keep clean. After washing her hands, a food handler applied a hand sanitizer, rubbed the sanitizer in, and immediately continued chopping vegetables on a cutting board. What did she do wrong? She did not let the sanitizer dry. After which activity must food handlers wash their hands? Clearing tables. What is the main reason for food handlers to avoid scratching their scalps? Spreading pathogens to the food. What is the purpose of a hand antiseptic? To reduce pathogens to safe levels. What should the temperature of the water be when washing hands? Warm. If food handlers are sick, they must to stay at home. Is it acceptable for a cook to drink coffee from a mug while preparing food? No, because the coffee cup is an uncovered container. Hand antiseptics should be used after hand washing. What should a food handler do when working with an infected cut on their finger? Cover the cut with an impermeable cover and wear a single-use glove. When using single-use gloves in an operation, a food handler should provide gloves made from non-latex materials. A food handler who spends an entire shift forming hamburger patties should change gloves every 4 hours during continual use, and more often if needed. Which food item may be handled with bare hands? Chopped carrots for stew. A food handler with a sore throat and a fever should be excluded from working in a daycare center because the children are a high-risk population. When can a food handler who has had diarrhea return to work? When they have been symptom-free for 24 hours. Where should staff members eat, drink, smoke, or chew gum? Designated areas. Which food can be handled with bare hands? Cheese for a pizza. When washing hands, what is the minimum time that food handlers should scrub hands and arms with soap? 10 seconds. How should food handlers keep their fingernails? Short and unpolished. When should food handlers wash their hands? Before starting a new task. What should a manager do with a food handler who is sneezing and has a persistent runny nose? Restrict them from working with exposed food. What is the only jewelry that may be worn on the hands or arms while handling food? Plain band ring. What is a carrier? Someone who carries pathogens without getting sick. Single-use gloves do not need to be worn when washing produce. Which illness needs to be reported to the regulatory authority? Hepatitis A. A cook wore single-use gloves while forming raw ground beef into patties. The cook continued to wear them while slicing hamburger buns. What mistake was made? The cook did not wash hands and put on new gloves before slicing the hamburger buns. What should food handlers do after prepping food and before using the restroom? Take off their aprons. A food handler wet his hands with warm water, applied soap, and scrubbed them for 15 seconds. Then he rinsed them in warm water and dried them on a cloth side towel. What did he do wrong? Dried hands on a side towel. A food handler has a wound on their finger. Can the wound cause a foodborne illness? Yes, because a wound that contains pathogens can contaminate food. Approximately how long should the whole handwashing process take? 20 seconds. Food handlers must remove jewelry from the hands.